In this video, we're going to be looking at the Tina 2 3D printer from Weedo. This is a 3D printer aimed at complete beginners and more specifically, children. So to be able to review it fairly, we really need to get somebody who it's aimed at to try it out. Luckily, my wife and I started growing our very own around 10 years ago, and I found him living in a corner of our house. This is Jacob.
Hi!
So when this printer was delivered, I pretty much just gave you the box and let you get on with it.
Yeah.
So how did you get on?
Good, but there was one bit that tripped me up. I started by getting everything out of the box, but I needed some help getting the actual printer out. I took everything out and found the two manuals.
So there's two manuals. So we've got an unpacking guide and a user's manual. Now, which one did you start with?
So I started with the unpacking guide and we found out that it's not very good. So then we went on to the user's manual, which was much better. It comes with a bit of cardboard to protect everything inside the printer, and in the unpacking guide, it didn't really say much about it. So that's when we went on to the user's manual, and we found out that there was a whole bit in there that told us how to get it out.
Yeah, we really struggled, didn't we? We ended up, I again came in to help on this bit, and you're probably best helping your child unpack the printer and get it set up fully. It is possible for a child to do it, but get that bit of cardboard that was inside and wrapped around all the internal parts is really fiddly, and you don't really want to be jabbing your fingers in. It kind of felt like you might cut yourself on something sharp inside.
Yay!
But like Jacob says, if we'd have started with the user's manual rather than the unpacking guide, we'd have probably been fine.
Then we put in the filament guide tube. But at that point, we were still on the unpacking guide. And in this one, it says the feed tube. And of course, as I'm a complete beginner, I had no idea what that was.
But like you say, if we'd have started with the user manual, what does it call it in the user manual?
The filament guide tube.
Which makes much more sense, doesn't it? You probably would have found it a lot easier.
This thing on the top.
Yeah, so this white tube initially is not connected to the outside of the printer, which is a shame because it looks like it probably could have done that in the packaging. But you have to just find the loose end of this white tube and just push it into the connector on the side, which is the extruder. This is where the filament is fed in. It's turned by the extruder on the side and pushed all the way through into the printer. Actually very simple. If you use the user manual, you'll be fine.
Once we got the filament guide tube connected and the cardboard out, it was ready to turn it on. This looks so cool. When we first got it on, there was a wizard to help us.
The first thing the wizard tells you to do is to load the filament. However, as we started the process, the printer threw a fault.
Luckily, Dad had seen that there was a plug undone on the bottom of the printer.
That's right, one of the stepper motors which moves the printer around had come unplugged. Now, I don't know if this was in transit or whether it had never been plugged in the first place. Now, luckily, I'm quite experienced with 3D printers and I know how these things work. So seeing that, I knew that it was never going to fire up properly. And once we plugged it in, the error went away.
However, when we turned it back on again, the wizard had gone. What this meant is that we had to figure out how to load the filament ourselves. This was fairly simple because all you had to do was press this button to go into the menu.
That's right, and in that menu there was an option to load filament just as there was in the wizard.
We needed somewhere to hang the filament, but neither of the manuals said where to actually put it. But luckily, Dad is experienced with 3D printers and noticed that there was a clip on the side that popped out and we could hang the filament on there.
Yeah, once we had the filament hung on the side, we then had to feed it into the extruder. Now, the instructions in both manuals say feed the filament in until you encounter resistance. So that's what we did. We fed it all the way through until it reached the nozzle, which at this stage was now hot.
So I pressed the button to start loading the filament, but then it just started purging loads of filament out for about 5 minutes.
That's it. It turned out that what it meant was you only needed to just put the filament just into the extruder. So I guess just entering the filament feed tube, and then it wanted to push it all the way through. Because we'd already got the filament to the nozzle, it then squeezed out this much filament out onto the build platform.
Purge more.
Do you think we need to purge any more?
No.
Not a big problem. It's not very expensive, but probably quite confusing as a new user.
However, now the filament was loaded, we could put the SD card in and select one of the prints, which happened to be the quickest print. It was this articulated butterfly.
That's right, the SD card comes loaded with a lot of files that you can just print straight away without having to mess with a separate computer or anything like that. The Tina 2 comes with a non-heated bed. So what it does with all the standard files on the card is prints what they call a raft first. This is a little area of flat filament that gives good bed adhesion for the prints. However, this particular print had a lot of very small, intricate parts, so removing it from the raft was actually really difficult. However, we didn't find that with all of the prints we did afterwards, so it may have just been a one-off. So actually, I think if we hadn't had that problem with the plug, it would have been quite quick and simple to set up, would you say?
So yeah, pretty simple. If it hadn't been for that plug coming out, it would have been pretty fine.
That's it, there are only a couple of steps to get this printer up and running. It comes almost 100% fully assembled and ready to go. The wizard would have guided you through loading the filament and getting everything running, and really you could have it up and running within about 10 minutes.
Expelliarmus.
So after this first print, how did it go? What else did you print? How did you get on?
Well, we also printed this ring that has like cat ears that I've been wearing. I had this like fidget spinner thing.
Yeah, this one was good because it shows the tight tolerances that are achievable on this printer. So this is what's called a print in place mechanism. As it comes off the print bed, it's ready to turn. There's no assembly needed at all, which is one of the beauties of 3D printing. And this model really shows it off quite well.
Then, next thing, we printed this little cute guy. He's like a dragon. Then we printed an articulated green fish in a different filament.
That's it, we wanted to try other filaments. So you're supplied with some filament on a very small reel from the manufacturer. So we wanted to try something a bit different. I use a filament dry box for my other printers, so I rigged this up to be able to feed the filament in. However, if you don't have one of these, it's very easy to find a file online for a spool holder that you can bolt to the side, as we have here.
Check the video about the dry box down below.
Once Jacob had printed out a few of the models that come on the SD card, I had a little bit of a play myself. Now the SD card that's supplied comes with a couple of different programs that you can use to what we call slice the model. Now with a 3D printer, it has to know how to create each individual layer and then move up to the next one, and you use slicer software to do this. The Tina 2 comes with two different types of software. One of them is Cura. Now Cura is an open source slicer that is free. The version of Cura that comes on the SD card is quite old, but I used this to start with to slice a few models that didn't come as standard. I printed out some boring things like calibration cubes and benchies. Now these are test prints to try and work out how well your printer's performing. The calibration cube actually came out really cleanly. There's a few layer lines on it, but other than that, it's nice. The benchie's not too bad, but it has a little bit of stringing, and that's probably caused by the fact that the Tina 2 doesn't have a print cooling fan. Now a more expensive printer will have a fan that blows onto the filament as it comes out of the nozzle to cool it down. The Tina 2 doesn't have one, which is not a major problem for a lot of the prints, but there will be certain prints that it struggles with. I wanted to test the build volume to show you the kind of size of print that you can achieve, and this was the largest thing that I printed. This gives you a little bit of an idea of the build volume of this printer. The print volume is 100 by 120 by 100 millimeters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but actually that's a reasonable size print. The printer comes with a removable magnetic build plate, which means it's very easy to remove your prints at the end and peel them off.
It's bendy.
The surface is a masking tape kind of material, which actually it grips the prints really well, and if you do find anything that doesn't want to stick, you can use some glue stick. You get a couple of these stickers spare in the box, and then once you've used those up, you can actually just use masking tape. The overall size of the machine is actually pretty small, as you can see. The dimensions are listed as being 210 by 210 by 210, but it's not a cube, so I don't really know how that works. But you can see that this printer actually sits inside the build volume of some of my larger printers. This means that it's really easy to find somewhere to put this, and that's not always the case with 3D printers. It'll easily sit on a desk or on a table or even in a kid's bedroom if you want to. The hot end temperature can reach a maximum of 260 degrees C, which is actually pretty good for a 3D printer. The specs say that it's only able to print with PLA, but I did some test prints with TPU and PETG, and actually they came out really well. The PETG had a little bit of stringing on it, which is probably caused by the lack of a part cooling fan, but the TPU was one of the cleanest TPU prints I've had off one of my machines, which, considering some of my machines are 4 times the price of this unit, that's really impressive. While we're talking about price, Weedo have actually offered you, my viewers, 15% off if you're in the UK or in the US and order this machine on Amazon. There are links and codes to use in the description below. One thing that may concern you about buying this 3D printer for children is the heat of the hot end, but unlike other printers, this one comes with a guard that stops any hands or paws going in to the hot and moving parts.
Why paws?
Well, like pets, cats and dogs. The printer has auto leveling, which in this price range is very rare, but means that there's no messing around with any adjuster knobs under the bed like there would be on other similar price machines. It has a resume print function for if the power goes off midway through a print, so it's not going to scrap it, it will restart from the same point. And this particular model actually has Wi-Fi, which means that you can connect it to your home Wi-Fi network and use an app to find more models to print without having to slice. Now, I think this is genius by Weedo because a lot of people, when they first get this printer, are not going to know how to use slicer software. The models on the SD card are only going to last you so long, but if you use the app, you'll find a whole host of other models that you can just upload to the machine and press print. So, Jacob, what do you think is the biggest problem a child would have using this printer?
It's really easy printing the stuff on the card, but if you want to print anything of your own, you have to learn how to use software.
That's it. Now, it's not the most complicated software in the world, but it is something to learn before being able to print your own things that you either design yourself or just download off the internet.
Is it actually safe for children to use?
I think so. I mean, as long as children are sensible and they're not going to start jamming things into the printer while it's moving, and the guard goes quite a long way to stop you doing that anyway, I think it's okay. The fact that this printer doesn't have a heated bed seems like a negative, but it's a massive plus on safety. There are less moving wires, which is often a common point of failure on 3D printers. With all that gone, the printer is quite a bit safer. So would you have it in your bedroom?
Yes, but it is surprisingly noisy.
Yeah, it is. Some of the more expensive printers come with silent stepper motors. That's part of the electronics of the printer, which help quieten down the motor movements. This printer doesn't have that, and so the stepper motors are quite noisy while the print is running.
Do you need a computer with this printer?
Well, no, if you only want to be limited to the files that are on the SD card or that come with the accompanying app. If you want to print anything else, then yes, you will need the use of a computer. Now, it doesn't have to be anything particularly powerful, as the slicer software isn't that labour intensive, but something that's less than 10 years old will do the job.
What else do you need to buy?
Well, the printer actually comes with almost everything you need. It would be handy to have some side cutters. Most printers are supplied with them. This printer isn't, but you can use scissors instead, and that's just to cut the filament before you put it in. It's also handy to have some glue stick. Now, I have seen some of these models do come with glue sticks, some don't, but I can recommend the Elmer's Disappearing Purple. It's really easy to see where you've been and washes off anything you need to.
Yay!
I would also say some masking tape would be useful once you've worn out those little paper squares that you get to put on your build surface.
Are there any other printers that you should get instead of this printer?
Well, it all depends really. It depends what you want. So for children, I would say probably not. The beauty of this 3D printer is that everything is enclosed, which makes it quite safe. Anything else within this price range will be a kit printer that is not in an enclosure, which brings with it all the hazards of exposed parts that little hands or paws can get stuck in.
Can we have some pros and cons, please?
Okay, so I'd say the fact that it's semi-enclosed means that it's good for kids and pets. And its size means that it's actually the only one of my 3D printers that I'd consider keeping in my house. What do you think?
Very easy to get started, but the cardboard at the beginning is hard to remove.
Yeah.
I also think it looks quite nice.
When it comes to cons, I'd say one of the biggest downsides is the fact that there's no part cooling fan. This restricts slightly certain shapes that you can print because the filament's not being cooled quickly enough. There's also no heated build plate, which I didn't really find to be a problem, particularly if you're happy to just put a little bit of glue stick on your build plate. And the slicer software. This is going to be a barrier to anyone entering the hobby, as a little bit of time is going to be needed to learn slicer software if you want to print anything that doesn't come with the printer. What do you think?
It's a bit noisy. You can only print small things and you can't modify it.
That's right. With a lot of other kit printers, there are modifications you can buy to upgrade it and make it a little bit more capable. With the Tina 2, that's not really an option. So once you outgrow it, you're looking at buying another machine.
So who shouldn't buy this printer?
Well, someone who wants to print larger things and has the time and patience to learn all about the way a 3D printer works, which you would have to do with other models. Also, if you want very highly detailed prints, then you'd probably be better off with a resin printer. So who would like this printer?
Someone who doesn't know that if they're going to get into 3D printing or not, and it's pretty cheap, so it's not really a big deal if you don't get into it as a serious hobby. Also someone who doesn't want to get into all the complicated bits of 3D printing.
That's right, the Tina 2 is pretty much ready to go out of the box, and you don't have to learn too much to start printing.
I'd also say that it's good for someone who only wants to print small things and who doesn't have a lot of space for a 3D printer.
I'd also add to that somebody who wants a enclosed 3D printer. There aren't many available in the lower price range.
If you want to see another 3D printer review video, click here, and for another video you might like, here. Thanks for watching. I'm over 10 years old.